Tower of London stands as a grim monument to the brutal history of England, holding secrets within its cold stone walls that have festered for centuries without release. This fortress has served as a palace and a prison, but it is best known as a place of execution where the mighty fell from grace and lost their heads to the axe or sword. The air here feels heavy with the weight of unseen eyes, watching every movement of the living who dare to trespass after the sun goes down. Fog frequently rolls off the river Thames to blanket the grounds in a suffocating gray mist that obscures the boundary between the past and the present day. It is in this setting that the restless spirit of a fallen queen waits to tell her tragic story. Among the many specters said to roam these blood-stained grounds, the ghost of Queen Anne Boleyn is the most persistent and terrifying of them all. She was the second wife of King Henry VIII, and her rise to power was as meteoric as her sudden and violent downfall. Her life ended on the 19th day of May in the year 1536 within the claustrophobic confines of the Tower Green. She was accused of treason and adultery and incest, which were charges fabricated to allow the king to marry another woman. Anne was not merely executed, she was erased from history by a husband who once worshipped her. However, her spirit refused to vanish into the oblivion that Henry desired, and instead she returns to the site of her death. The execution of Anne Boleyn was unique because she was granted the mercy of dying by the sword rather than the clumsy axe that had butchered so many others before her. A skilled swordsman was summoned all the way from Calais in France to perform the deed with a single clean stroke. On the morning of her death, she walked to the scaffold with a composure that unsettled the witnesses who had gathered to watch a queen die. She wore a robe of dark gray damask over a crimson petticoat and an ermine mantle. Her dark hair was tucked away beneath a white coif. As she knelt in the straw, she prayed for the king who had condemned her. The French swordsman called out for his sword to distract her, and then severed her head in one swift motion. The immediate aftermath of the execution was chaotic and disrespectful, as the king had not provided a proper coffin for his discarded wife. Her ladies in waiting were forced to gather her bloody remains and place them into an empty arrow chest that was found nearby. Her head was tucked beside her body, and the chest was buried hastily beneath the floor of the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula. This lack of proper burial rites and the violent nature of her departure from the living world created a scar on the spiritual landscape of the tower. It is believed that this trauma bound her soul to the stone and mortar of the fortress. She was denied peace in life, and thus she finds no peace in death. Sightings of Anne Boleyn began shortly after her death and have continued with chilling regularity for nearly 5 centuries. Unlike other ghosts that appear as vague mists or cold spots. Anne often appears as a solid human figure, which makes the encounter all the more disturbing for those who witness it. She is most frequently seen near the Queen's house, where she spent her final days before her execution. Witnesses describe a woman in Tudor dress pacing the corridors with a frantic energy, as if she is still awaiting the reprieve that never came. Sometimes she is seen staring out of the window, overlooking the green, with a look of profound sadness etched upon her pale face. One of the most terrifying aspects of the hauntings is that Anne does not always appear as she did in life. There are numerous accounts of a headless figure roaming the grounds of the Tower of London under the cover of darkness. This macabre apparition carries her severed head tucked underneath her arm, while the face continues to scream in silent agony. This grotesque manifestation serves as a brutal reminder of the violence inflicted upon her body. The headless queen has been seen gliding silently toward the chapel where her body lies buried. Those who have encountered this version of her spirit report an overwhelming sensation of nausea and a primal instinct to flee from the unnatural sight. The interior of the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula is a focal point for the supernatural activity associated with Anne Boleyn. Late at night, when the tourists have gone and the gates are locked, the chapel often glows with an inexplicable light. Passing guards have reported seeing a spectral procession of lords and ladies in Tudor attire moving slowly down the aisle toward the altar. At the head of this ghostly congregation walks Anne herself. She appears whole and beautiful in these moments, leading the procession to her final resting place. However, the feeling inside the chapel is not one of peace, but of intense sorrow and a suffocating pressure that forces the living to leave. In the winter of 1864, a soldier of the King's Royal Rifle Corps was on guard duty near the lieutenant's lodgings. The night was bitterly cold, and a thick fog drifted from the river, obscuring his vision. As he paced his beat, he noticed a white figure emerging from the mist directly in his path. He challenged the intruder, but received no answer. The figure continued to float toward him with a deliberate and menacing pace. The soldier raised his bayonet and charged at the woman, only to feel his weapon pass through empty air as a shock of cold electricity jolted his body. He collapsed unconscious where he stood. When the soldier was found the next morning, he was accused of sleeping on duty, which was a court-martial offense that could lead to severe punishment. He swore to his superiors that he had seen a ghost and had attacked it. Initially, no one believed his story until another officer came forward. Major General J.D. Dundas testified that he had watched the entire incident from the window of his quarters in the Bloody Tower. He confirmed seeing the white figure and watching the sentry charge at it before falling. The testimony of a high-ranking officer saved the soldier from punishment and added a credible entry to the official records of the haunting. The Queen's house is a Tudor structure within the tower walls that serves as the home for the resident governor. It was here that Anne was imprisoned and interrogated before her trial. Residents of the house have long complained of unexplainable noises and the feeling of being watched. There is a specific room where guests often refuse to sleep because of the oppressive atmosphere. It is said that Anne paces the floorboards of this room throughout the night. The sound of rustling silk skirts and the soft tread of slippers can be heard when the house is otherwise silent. It is the sound of a woman pacing back and forth, waiting for news of her fate. Another location frequented by the spirit of Anne Boleyn is the Salt Tower. Although she was not imprisoned there herself, the Salt Tower has a dark history of torture and suffering that seems to attract restless spirits. Visitors to this part of the fortress have reported sudden drops in temperature and the smell of old perfume that has no earthly source. Some claim to have felt the light touch of a hand on their shoulder or the brush of fabric against their skin. These tactile encounters are often accompanied by a feeling of profound grief that brings tears to the eyes of unsuspecting tourists who have no personal connection to the history. The legend of the Headless Queen walking the Tower Green is perhaps the most famous image associated with the haunting. The green is the site where the scaffold was erected and where the grass is said to never grow properly on the spot where the axe fell. In the dead of night, the mist seems to form into human shapes near the memorial site. Security guards who patrol the grounds with dogs report that the animals often refuse to go near the execution site. The dogs will whine and cower with their tails between their legs or bark aggressively at empty space where human eyes can see nothing. It is not only the visual manifestations that create fear, but also the auditory phenomena that plague the tower. The sound of phantom singing has been heard echoing through the stone corridors of the White Tower. The voice is described as high and mournful singing songs that date back to the 16th century. Anne was a patron of the arts and a musician in life, and it seems she continues her songs in death. The melody is often cut short abruptly, as if the singer has been silenced by a sudden violence. This auditory haunting adds a layer of psychological horror to the location. During the Second World War, the Tower of London was used to imprison spies, and the atmosphere of the fortress became even more charged with fear. Guards patrolling during the blackout reported seeing the White Lady more frequently than ever before. It was as if the violence of the modern war had awakened the dormant energies of the past. One sentry reported seeing a woman in a hood standing on the battlements, looking out toward the burning city of London. When he approached her, she turned to reveal a face that was a featureless void, before vanishing into the smoke and darkness. The psychological toll on the yeoman warders who live within the tower walls is significant. These men and women are tough military veterans, yet many have stories they are reluctant to share. They speak of doors opening and closing on their own, and objects being moved by invisible hands. There is a general consensus that one must respect the spirits or face their wrath. Anne Boleyn is treated with a particular reverence. She is not seen as a monster, but as a wronged woman whose anger has kept her tethered to the earth. Her presence demands acknowledgement and respect from those who inhabit her prison. There is a pervasive theory that the ghost of Anne Boleyn is not alone, but acts as a beacon for other lost souls. The tower is crowded with the spirits of the executed, including the endless line of traitors and royals who met their end there. However, Anne seems to command the space. Her energy is the strongest and most distinct. When she appears, other paranormal activity ceases, as if the lesser ghosts are making way for the queen. This hierarchy of the dead mirrors the rigid social structure of the Tudor court that ruled them in life. The anniversary of her execution on May the 19th is a date that guards and historians approach with trepidation. It is on this night that the activity is said to be at its peak. There are reports of a spectral carriage drawn by headless horses speeding across the green. The carriage carries the queen to her death in a loop that replays endlessly. The sound of hooves on the cobblestones and the clatter of wheels can be heard even when nothing is visible. It is a residual haunting where the energy of the past event is so strong that it imprints itself on the environment. Historians have tried to rationalize the sightings by suggesting they are the result of overactive imaginations fueled by the grim atmosphere of the tower. They argue that the fog and the shadows create pareidolia, where the brain sees faces in random patterns. However, this does not explain the collective sightings, where multiple witnesses see the same figure at the same time. Nor does it explain the physical interactions, where people are pushed or touched. The consistency of the descriptions over hundreds of years suggests that there is something more than mere imagination at work. The tragic figure of Anne Boleyn represents the ultimate betrayal. She was killed by the man she loved, and the country she tried to serve turned its back on her. This intense emotional energy is what fuels a poltergeist or a haunting. The Tower of London acts as a battery that stores this negative energy. The stone walls are thick, and the dungeons are deep, effectively trapping the emotions of the condemned. Anne acts as the conduit for this pain, releasing it in bursts of supernatural activity that terrify the living. Some witnesses claim to have communicated with the spirit. Psychics and mediums who have visited the tower describe Anne as confused and angry. They say she does not understand why she was killed, and she is still seeking an audience with the king to plead her innocence. This suggests that her spirit is trapped in a specific moment, in time unable to move forward or find resolution. She is stuck in the days leading up to her execution, reliving the fear and the betrayal over and over again for eternity. The cultural impact of the ghost of Anne Boleyn cannot be overstated. She has become a symbol of the dark romanticism of the Tudor era. Her story is told and retold to millions of visitors every year, which perhaps feeds the energy of the haunting. The collective focus of so many minds on her tragedy might act as a summon keeping her spirit active. In this sense, the tourists are complicit in her continued imprisonment. We come to see the ghost, and in doing so, we ensure she can never leave. There are specific artifacts within the tower that seem to trigger activity. The sword used to execute her is not there, but items from her era often cause temperature fluctuations. When the crown jewels are moved or cleaned, guards report an increase in unease in the Martin Tower. Although Anne was never crowned, with the current imperial state crown, her connection to the monarchy binds her to the symbols of power. She haunts the regalia that she once wore, and the throne that was stolen from her daughter for a time. The ghost is not always confined to the Tower of London. There are legends that she appears at Hever Castle, her childhood home, and at Blickling Hall, where she was born. At Blickling Hall, it is said that on the anniversary of her death, she arrives in a carriage driven by a headless coachman, holding her own severed head on her lap. But the tower is her primary residence in death. It is the place where her life was taken and where her body remains. It is the epicenter of her spiritual torment. Skeptics often point to the lack of photographic evidence as proof that the ghost does not exist. However, in the era of digital cameras, there have been numerous anomalies captured in the tower. Strange orbs of light and misty figures often appear in photos taken by tourists near the scaffold site. While these can often be dismissed as dust or moisture, some defy explanation. They show distinct human shapes standing in areas that were empty when the shutter clicked. These fleeting images offer a tantalizing glimpse into the invisible world. The confrontation between the living and the dead in the tower is rarely violent, but always psychologically damaging. Those who have looked into the eyes of the apparition describe a void where a soul should be. It is a look of absolute despair that haunts the witness long after they have left the grounds. It forces them to confront the reality of death and the possibility of a tortured afterlife. The ghost of Anne Boleyn serves as a memento mori, a reminder that power and beauty can be stripped away in an instant. The Chapel Royal, where she is buried, was renovated in the Victorian era. During the excavation, the bones of the executed were dug up and examined. The skeleton found in the arrow chest was identified as female and of the correct age and height to be Anne. The doctor who examined the bones noted that the neck vertebrae had been severed cleanly. This physical confirmation of the brutal method of her death bridged the gap between history and legend. Even after being reburied with proper dignity, the hauntings did not cease. Modern technology has been brought in to investigate the tower. Electromagnetic field detectors and thermal cameras have been used by paranormal investigators. These devices often light up in the chapel and near the Queen's house, indicating high levels of energy. The fluctuations in the electromagnetic field are consistent with theories of paranormal activity. The science seems to support the folklore, suggesting that there is a measurable disturbance in the environment that correlates with the historical tragedy. The influence of Anne Boleyn extends to the ravens of the tower. Legend says that if the ravens leave the tower, the kingdom will fall. The birds are kept there by a decree that dates back centuries. The ravens are known to behave strangely near the site of the execution. They will often gather in a circle and croak loudly at an unseen presence. The yeoman raven master has reported that the birds seem to interact with someone who is not there suggesting they can see the spirit that eludes human eyes. As night falls over London, the modern city lights up with neon and electricity. But the tower remains a dark void on the riverbank. The thick stone walls block out the noise of the traffic, and the sirens creating a pocket of silence where the past is louder than the present. It is in this silence that the footsteps begin. The sound of a heavy door creaking open or a sudden draft in a sealed room signals her arrival. She comes when the world is quiet and the mind is vulnerable. The Haunting of the Tower of London by Anne Boleyn is more than just a ghost story. It is a testament to the enduring power of injustice. Her death was a judicial murder orchestrated by the highest power in the land. The energy of that injustice is what keeps her spirit tethered. She is a witness to her own murder, refusing to let the world forget what was done to her. Until the crime is acknowledged and the balance is restored, she will continue to walk the green. Ultimately, the ghost of Anne Boleyn serves as the eternal guardian of the tower's dark history. She ensures that the visitors who come to gaze at the jewels and the armor also feel the chill of the executioner's blade. She transforms the location from a museum into a mausoleum. Her presence is the heartbeat of the fortress, a cold and rhythmic reminder that the past is never truly dead. As long as the tower stands, she will be there waiting in the shadows, watching the living with jealous eyes.